Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Banfield, and I am the Director of Development Services here at the City of Barrie. And I just want to thank you all very much for taking some time this afternoon to hear a bit about the first draft of the city's comprehensive zoning bylaw. I'm joined here today. It's so hard with these virtual screens because right now I can see Jen Roberts and I can see Liam. So Jen is one of our managers here at Development Services, and Liam is a planner with us as well at the City of Barrie. Tom Wierspa is our supervisor, and he is not on camera, but he is around, as well as the rest of our policy team, Jordan Lambie, Ali Bradford, and Olga Sanchez. So all of us are very easy to find, but Jen did have our emails and stuff up there as well. You can keep going, Jen. So today we're here to talk to you a bit about the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. That 100% is designed to implement the vision and the policies that were established in the new official plan. So the zoning bylaw, I always say, from a policy perspective, the official plan is kind of the overarching document, whereas the zoning bylaw is kind of rests underneath it with more detail, with this really kind of, as I said, more nuts and bolts, more details, more specifications, different standards. And the idea is that, oh, there's Tom's camera's popped on, is the idea that, as I said, the official plan and the zoning bylaw work together to guide development in the City of Barrie. So if any of you follow City of Barrie planning like the way I do, just kidding, maybe not as much as I do, but we have done and spent many times, many years actually working on a new official plan as a start. That project started back in 2018, and it was done with lots of robust community consultation. It was approved by our council last February. And we just received notice a week or so ago on April 11th that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing approved the official plan. In the planning world, that's a very big deal. We're super excited to have that document approved. There's been a couple of kind of local news articles about it, but the province approves things with what they call it, their changes are called modifications. So there are some modifications that came with the minister's approval that staff are just working through right now. We're going to be, incorporating all of those modifications, and we'll have a new document and map version as soon as we can, most likely by hopefully the end of next week. That's kind of the plan, and then it'll be on our website as per usual. As I said before, the new zoning bylaw implements the vision of the official plan. It's the new zoning, the first new zoning bylaw in 13 years, and actually, ironically, the official plan is actually also 13 years old as well. The version that we're working with right now was approved by the minister in April of 2010, and so everything's about 13 years old. Everything needs to be updated, and so yeah, there's just a lot of changes in the world in 13 years, and certainly in land use planning. So draft one of the document, what we're here to talk to you a bit about today, was released on Monday, March 27th. All of the documentation is available on buildingbarrie.ca /zoning. And so it was released, and, we're calling it our conversation draft, I guess, if you will, conversation starter. We know that from our experience with the official plan that while we can always have meaningful conversations about land use planning or about city building or even community vision, we know from our experience with the official plan that that we really started getting meaningful feedback once we released a first version of it. So we're doing the same with the zoning bylaw. We're releasing that first version. We're calling it a conversation starter, and here we are. We're here to tell you a little bit about it. And we fully expect that the version is going to change, and it's going to only get better with the feedback that we hear. So why does zoning matter? So as I said a little bit, the official plan really is a guiding document. It really is an overarching vision. It's a little less specific than the details of a zoning bylaw. And the official plan really, what we always talk about, provides like the framework for growth, the community structure, and then it's all intended to guide the city to accommodate additional people and jobs. And in this case, the official plan goes to the year 2051. And so that, as I said, has just been approved by the minister, and it's in effect as of the date that the minister approved it, which was April 11th, 2023. So from now on, every single new application that comes into the city is going to be looked at against the new official plan. And then the zoning bylaw really is a much more of a control document. It tells us exactly how land can be used. It tells us where buildings and structures can be located on a lot, how they interact with each other, the types and forms of buildings, as well as how those buildings can be used, like what types of uses can be next door to each other, and which types of uses maybe need a bit of separation. You can continue there for me, whoever's advancing. So this is a little bit of how to use the zoning bylaw. And this is how I would always suggest people start. If you actually, not that anybody really necessarily prints things out as much, where we're so much more digital now, but if you were, like I've got my version of it right here. So if you were going to print out your version of the document, let's see how my screen isn't working here. I don't know why. You've lost me altogether, but if I were, oh, here it is. It's quite thick, it's quite big, not necessarily something that someone's going to want to curl up with. So what I always say to people, when you look at any of these, and this, the same can be said for the official plan, if you did want to go back and take a look at the official plan, take a look at the maps first. That's that's kind of the easiest way, not only to orient yourself with the community, but it's the easiest way to orient yourself with these documents. So find the map. And then I always say to people, the best thing to do is find the area of the city that is meaningful to you, whether it's where you live, whether it's where your kids go to school, or whether you go to school, where you work, where your church is, where your favorite bakery is. Find an area in the city and take a look at it on the map. Much like both the official plan and the zoning bylaw work, I would say, a little bit like coloring books, and in that every color matches up to a legend. The next slide that I look at will show you the different types of land uses, but ultimately it's a bit of the colors are what differentiate the land uses. So, you know, find the area, take a look at the colors in your area, and then you basically kind of go back and look at, so if it is, as I said, a particular zone, then you look at the policies of the zone. In addition to the policies in the particular zone, whether you're a residential zone or a commercial zone, there are a whole bunch of general provisions. And I always do say, take a look at the general provisions as well. Those are things that apply to all zones. And so you want to make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with those as well. And there might be some site-specific area policies. And what that means is there might be particular areas in the city that maybe have a historic composition. So we want to take a look at the historic conservation areas, or maybe you're in the downtown, which is the urban growth center, or a strategic growth area, or it might be near a GO station. One of the two Metrolinx GO stations have what we call a MTSA, a major transit station area. So there's kind of be some of those kind of site specific things that you also want to look at, because all of these policies and standards all work together. It's not like you can just look at one and say, okay, I'm good, I'm good to go. You have to look at everything all together. So as I said, within each zone, we often get here, people will come to the counter and say, what can I do on my property? Well, that's what the zoning bylaw tells you. So you can take a look at what and the planner, if you came into the counter, the planner would say, where do you live? We'd look it up on a map. We'd say it's this zone. And then we'd look at a list of what you can do on the property. So that's the same as much as, I'm saying to you today, how you can kind of do it yourself. We do have planners every day of the week that are either an email or a phone call or a visit to City Hall away. And then if you just want to advance, Jen, to the next slide, which is, as I said to you, the logo, and this is, or the legend, sorry, not logo, legends, where the coloring book kind of comes to life, and where you can see, if you remember back to the map that we were just looking at, so many of the shades of green are either environmental protection or maybe an open space zone. Purple, generally speaking, is employment areas, industrial land, jobs, and kind of thing like that. The neighborhood area are more of our residential areas, and the differentiation from 1, 2, and 3 really relate to the densities of the buildings in those areas, as well as medium density and high density. Again, generally speaking, medium density would be more like mid-rise developments, and high-rise would be anything kind of over 12 stories. And then just the same thing with commercial zones. So the kind of the bluish colors are commercial. So if you were looking at, say, Bayfield Street on the map, you would see that it's, various shades of blue representing kind of the Bayfield Street corridor and the commercial uses there. Just generally speaking, of course. So Jen, I think that's it for me, and I'm going to hand it over to you, or back to you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your attention, everyone.
So the change, our new zoning bylaw, the format has changed significantly, and it's a transformational and a modern bylaw, and it separates both use and form. So you'll see that each zone has a list of permitted uses, along with a list of permitted built forms and standards for each of those built forms. So a use would be residential, a daycare, a restaurant, just to name a few examples. And then your built forms is the actual building type that those uses take place within. So we do have a list of all of our built forms, and I do have some images on the next couple slides that I'm going to go through. So this is a comprehensive list of the built forms: a detached house, a semi-detached house, row house on street, which is sort of a rebranding of townhouses to row houses. I'm struggling with this today. Row house on street with rear access, a row house cluster, coach houses, which are rebranded detached accessory dwelling units, so our secondary suites. Cluster detached is what we're using to call tiny homes or micro homes in the bylaw. We then have low rise, mid rise, and flex buildings. A flex building would be your typical institutional, commercial, industrial buildings, such as hospital, school, grocery stores, standalone large retail. And then the final of our high-rise built form, tower and tower with a podium. So those are the different built forms, and certain built forms are allowed in certain zones and with certain uses. Then the zone we figure most residents will be interested in are our neighborhood areas. So there's 7 zoning categories within neighborhood areas. Neighborhood low, which is your typical low-rise built forms of single, detached, semis, duplexes, row houses, and small walk-up apartments. The main difference between neighborhood area low 1, 2, and 3 is the number of units allowed within within a dwelling unit, as well as the height of the building, the number of stories. And the maximum height of the stories in the neighborhood area is 4. With neighborhood area low being a maximum of 3 stories. The built form does vary slightly within neighborhood 1, 2, and 3. Detached houses, semi-detached row houses are permitted in all neighborhood zones, and low rise, such as walk-up apartments, are permitted in neighborhood low 2 and neighborhood low 3. We are encouraging gentle density in neighborhood areas, where where redevelopment is happening, we are leveraging average front yard setbacks with adjacent properties to maintain established streetscapes. This is a new idea from our existing bylaw, which we hope was going to make infill developments more in line with existing neighborhoods. The neighborhood medium is encouraging areas of medium density as defined in the official plan. These are typically found on intensification corridors, and slightly higher height permissions to transition from neighborhood area low zones are permitted. The main difference between neighborhood medium 1 and neighborhood medium 2 is that there's a requirement for a component of mixed use in a neighborhood medium 2 zone. Neighborhood high are existing high-rise apartments in neighborhood areas, allowing for between 9 and 12 stories. You won't see anything higher than 12 stories in a neighborhood area. Neighborhood commercial is our existing plazas within or abutting neighborhoods, creating the opportunities for walkable communities. I'm going to talk briefly about coach houses. So these, as mentioned, they're known as detached accessory dwelling units. The provincial government did pass legislation in December under Bill 23 that allows, as of right, 3 dwelling units on every property. We have permitted coach houses in Barrie under the existing zoning bylaw for the last few years. There are some proposed changes to the standards in the draft zoning bylaw. There's some decreased setbacks from the rear yard from 3 meters from 7 meters, and the side yard from 1.2 to 3 meters. Increased height if there's parking provided at grade for those units. And we are requiring windows to only be interior facing to help protect privacy of the adjacent yards. Okay. Tom, I'm going to hand it over to you now to talk about urban design.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Hello, everybody. Apologize, I missed the beginning. I just had a technical issue. So my name is Thomas Gersba. I'm your supervisor of growth management here at the city. And I've got 4 or 5 slides to get through today. And the first one being urban design. So being a form-based, so building form-based zoning bylaw, we do provide provisions around urban design. So we provide urban design for all, we provide urban design provisions for all build form types, with more focus being towards the taller buildings. And we provide direction on things like distances between the faces of buildings, the step back. So as a building goes up, it has to step back a little bit and then it can keep going up. The ratio of window to wall. So if you got a large wall, there's a ratio. We like to see a certain number of walls on those walls. Separation distances between towers, location of entrances in buildings to make sure they're oriented in a logical place, site access provisions as well, articulation and orientation of buildings. So with their step backs in the structure of the building, as well as how the building's sort of placed on the site. We also provide some direction on materiality. We ask for things to make sure that they're high quality and long and last over, can weather our weather here in Barrie, our northern climate, as well as that they look nice as well. So we ask for things like natural stone and brick, but we don't necessarily prescribe colors. There's still quite a bit of flexibility for architectural design. So we just provide some minimum direction. And again, it's all to encourage to have high quality and aesthetically pleasing developments in the city. And this is, of course, also reflected and supported by policies in our official plan. So I'll go to the next slide, please, for mixed use city. So Jen talked about this a little bit, about encouraging more sort of mixed uses in our neighborhoods, but we're actually going mixed use citywide. So we are planning for, and I'm going to use a zoning term, we are permitting Barrie to mature into a mixed use city. We want to transition Barrie from being a city that is dominated by single use areas to one that has more mix of uses. This encourages a more efficient use of land, creates more compact, more walkable, more attractive communities, rather than communities where you have something here and something way over there, and the only way to get to over there is by car. We're trying to promote more complete communities that fit people's lives throughout their lifetime. Almost every zone in our new zoning bylaw, except for environmental protection and like restricted industrial permits, and at times requires a mix of uses, with the requirement for mix of uses being geared towards more urban zones. So like, we don't require a mix of uses in those neighborhood areas where a majority of our residents live. But as you get towards like your Young Streets, your Bayfields, your ESSAs, that's when the requirements for a mix of uses start to kick in. And as a result of going sort of mixed use and mixed usifying our zoning bylaw is that we don't have a mixed use zone anymore. It just doesn't make sense to say something's mixed use where almost every zone is mixed use. So that terminology has been dropped. So that's a bit of a change. And as a result of being more mixed use, we give people the flexibility of being able to match their form to their use. So as long as that form is permitted in that zone, and as long as that use is permitted in that zone, folks can match things up. So if you want to put a townhouse and you want to have a dwelling and an office, you can do that. If you want to have a triplex where you have an office and 2 dwelling units, you can do that. Or you can have retail, office, and residential above. So there's a mix of uses, you know, at all levels and every built form. Thank you. So the next thing I'm going to jump to is we talked about Bayfield Street a little bit more. So another sort of new concept that we introduced through the official plan is this idea of a commercial district. Basically, it's where you have a large amount of commercial uses in close proximity where they tend, and you know, the way that they're oriented, function as a district together. So it's one that we're excited about because, again, based on the concept of going mixed use, a lot of these areas are single use and we'd like them go towards more mixed use. So introducing more uses rather than just commercial, we're now permitting residential uses to go in those commercial districts. So we also have other commercial zone, which is not necessarily for districts. This is for more isolated sites. For if you have a corner gas station, we're not going to call it a commercial district, but it is a commercial zone. So again, we are encouraging our shopping malls, big box sites, or plazas to make more efficient or better use of their land, and saying, you know what, you can put residential here. And we know that this model works. It's currently being implemented, or it has been implemented by the property owners of Park Place. There's currently retirement residential there, and there's going to be more residential in the future. So we like to see that model replicated where appropriate. You know, okay, that's it. Yeah, that's no problem. Thanks very much. And yeah, we'll go to the next one. Just cognizant of time here. So urban zones is another cool zone that you know, we're introducing in the official plan. So right now, sorry, in the zoning bylaw, as of right now, I think there's four zones that are in effect in our downtown and around our major transit station areas, of which there are 2, one in Allendale, and then the other one being Barrie South Go. And a major transit station area is not just the location of this transit station itself, it is a broader area. It's usually around a 10-minute walk. So when we refer to an MTSA or major transit station area, we're talking about that larger area. And so we have zones that apply exclusively to these areas as we see them urbanizing quite intensely over time. Like downtown is already urbanized, but we see it urbanizing further. So that's why we have 2 sort of exclusive urban zones, one being the urban core and an urban transition. So urban core, as the name implies, is used for more of the interior of our intensification areas. And urban transition is, of course, more on the outside, on the periphery of our intensification areas to allow for a more gradual transition to the neighborhood area lands, where there's more like towns, singles, and things like that. So this zone will have quite a bit of height permissions. You're looking at up to 25 stories with ability to go higher through a zoning bylaw amendment. And that has its own public process, but the urban core zone will allow it up to 25 stories. So this is in these zones, if you recall, I spoke about urban design earlier. This zone has the highest level of sort of urban design, requiring tower separation distances, facing distances, and focusing on things like human scale design to make sure that our urban environments don't feel sort of what you're seeing on the screen. You don't want to have buildings sort of looming over you and sort of making you feel enclosed. We want to have more human scale design. So we've baked that into our zoning bylaw to make sure that our downtowns and our MTSA is pleasant. And yeah, go ahead, next one. So another thing that we deal with, because Barrie was settled in the 1800s, we have quite a bit of historic built forms, so basically historic buildings. So we already provide through our current zoning bylaw and through our current urban design guidelines direction on how to integrate development into these historic areas. And the thing is, a lot of the times, and I've been doing this for quite a while at the City of Barrie, is a lot of times people who are developing or builders, say, what does it mean to fit a building into a historic character? What is historic character? Can you tell us a little bit more? So our zoning bylaw provides a little bit more direction on how to integrate a building into a historic area. A lot of the integration issues that we see with new development coming into historic areas has actually been addressed by what Jen talked about, by our neighborhood area zones, specifically about the front yard setback being average of adjacent buildings. So you're not going to have, hopefully, if we do this right, you're not going to have new development that protrudes way past the front yard setbacks of other buildings. It might be a little bit forward, but it won't be obtrusively forward, and it won't be obviously out of the rhythm of the streetscape. So we want to make sure that we do that specifically for our historic neighborhood. It's quite important as well. The way we decided to provide a little bit more direction around historic character and integrating within historic neighborhoods is to create a historic overlay zone. And right now, the historic overlay zone applies to places like Allendale, where we currently have some urban design guidelines and direction for integration within a historic neighborhood. We've expanded it to lands on Blake Street. There's some downtown as well. We do expect that the historic character overlay will expand from draft 1 to draft 2, so you can expect to see that grow a little bit more. But of course, we appreciate your feedback on where you think that is appropriate. And to provide you a high-level summary of what the overlay zone does is it provides direction on average setbacks, lot sizes, heights of buildings, and there are some materiality requirements as well. So the materials of buildings are what the materials that buildings are covered with. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for historic character. So I'll turn it over back to Jen to wrap us up. Thanks, Jen.
We're going to just talk briefly about parking. So the parking has changed significantly. Our approach to parking has changed significantly since with this proposed bylaw, and we've introduced the idea of having parking districts. So there's 4 parking districts proposed. One is then the downtown urban growth center and major transit station areas. The second is in our strategic growth areas, which are our intensification corridors and areas with frequent transit routes. The third is our employment areas, and the fourth is all other lands, which is mostly your neighborhood areas. So there has been, we've introduced also a minimum standard parking and a maximum standards for parking spaces, and they have decreased slightly from our existing bylaw, and mostly in areas where we can justify that there's transit availability, either by service transit or active transportation. So the parking map is available on Building Barrie for you to download and take a look at. And the standards do also talk about use. So residential uses versus areas of where you might have large groups of people gathering, and then for all other non-residential uses as well. The other exciting topic that has gotten a lot of traction, we've had a lot of feedback online about backyard hens. So this draft zoning bylaw does address the regulations for chicken coops, so the setbacks from the rear and side yard, height of chicken coops, etc. Should there be a will of council to allow for backyard hens, Other bylaws still need to be amended. The animal control bylaw, noise bylaw, and looking at licensing of backyard chickens. So the approval of backyard hens needs more than just the approval of the zoning bylaw. This is a first step, but we have heard loud and clear that there is a desire for us to take a look at investigating the feasibility of backyard hens. Next step. So we've asked for comments to be submitted on our first draft of the comprehensive bylaw by April 28th, which is next Friday. We will then take all those comments and feedback away and work on a second draft to be released again for public consultation we hope to have that released in June. We will then have our statutory public meeting and open house, which will involve more public consultation in the fall. And the goal is to have a new zoning bylaw adopted by council by the end of 2023. To stay up to date on this project, please subscribe or register for project updates at buildingberry/zoning. We are welcoming comments to be provided by email to newzoningbylaw@berry.ca. We will be doing some Q&A at the end of this session today and answer as many questions as we can. We do encourage you to submit comments though to the email so we can categorize them and respond to them. And as mentioned at the beginning, there will be significant changes from draft 1 to draft 2. So this really is a great time for you to provide input on things that you like or don't like and ideas of what needs to change. So thank you all very much for attending this afternoon. We are going to open the floor up for questions and feedback. I am going to stop the recording right now so that we can start to hear from you.